federal election 2025 continues, and we're seeing some interesting promises from our federal leaders. So how will these impact affordability and our economy? Well, joining us to discuss this is Professor Moshe Lander. He is a senior lecturer on economics with Concordia University. He's joining us from Montreal. Good to have you with us today, Dr. Lander.
Hello.
Okay, so one of the first things Mark Carney did was reduce that consumer carbon tax down to zero, but the industrial carbon tax remains. So Poilievre is now promising to get rid of the industrial tax as well. So how do these moves compare economically?
It's bad economically, and it shows the difference between Mark Carney, the central banker, and Mark Carney, the politician. He realized that for any chance of winning the election, he has to negate the Conservatives' Axe the Tax campaign. So he decided to throw in, along with the other Liberal leader candidates, and say, well, I'm going to get rid of it too. From an economic standpoint, the carbon tax is not just a good thing, it's a necessary thing, not for its ability to raise revenue, but merely because it factors in the correct cost of oil and gas and other carbon-emitting industries and their impact on the changing climate. So I think that both of them have made this path as a political move rather than a good economics move. But I don't think that they're really worried about good economics at this point. They just want to form a government.
Good point there. Housing affordability, obviously a big concern for Canadians. Both the Liberals and Conservatives are promising to remove the GST on new homes, and the Liberals to the tune of homes up to $1 million in value, and the Conservatives are coming in and they're kind of one-upping it with saying 1.3 million. So to what degree will this help in buying a home? That's quite a bit of money there.
It won't. It's a really bad policy on both sides. And the million three is the irrelevant part. It's the fact that you're giving consumers more incentive to demand housing. So if you're giving more demand into a market that's already supply constrained, you're just going to drive prices up. And so that's not going to solve housing affordability. That's going to make it worse. The biggest problem with the housing markets is on the supply side. It's that zoning laws are so restrictive that it's very difficult to build high density housing. Every homeowner says, I totally agree there should be more housing, but not in my neighborhood. And so that lobbying with municipal city halls is what keeps housing from coming online. Builders will say they're having a hard time finding tradespeople. In Alberta, we've talked for decades about a lack of tradespeople. There's only so many people that Sate and Nate can bring in and graduate out the door. And so those are the issues. Incentivizing consumers to buy housing is not going to solve that problem. So again, good politics, bad economics.
Okay, so any thoughts then on Jagmeet Singh's promise to set aside 100% of suitable federal land to build more than 100,000 rent-controlled homes by 2035?
I guess it's maybe the best policy, at least because it's addressing the supply side, but you still need people that are going to come in and want to build on that. Remember that it's not Jagmeet Singh or the NDP candidates that are going to go out and actually build the homes. So you still need to go find construction workers that are going to want to build those homes. And you're now going to have to deal with the federal government that is going to set standards there that might be different, more stringent, and more detailed than what you would get if this were merely just a market transaction where some developer comes along and says, this is what I envision using the land for. So it is maybe the least damaging of the leader's policies, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good policy either.
Okay, and we got both the Tories and the Liberals promising to cut taxes from the lowest income tax bracket. So Poilievre will chop off 2.25 percentage points, while Carney only is cutting it down by 1%. So how will this impact Canadians, and could it be a significant advantage to the Conservatives?
Well, it's an extra 1.25 percentage points, so they both agree on the one. It's the extra 1.25. The thing is, when it comes to labor supply, are you really influenced by that lowest tax bracket? If you're working part-time jobs, just because the lowest tax bracket is lowered, doesn't mean that you're going to race to your employer and say, well, now I want an extra shift. And there might not even be an extra shift to give. If you're a salaried worker, especially if you're earning above that lowest tax bracket amount, it's not going to change your number of full-time hours. So a government worker, for example, who works 36.25 hours is not going to now work 37 hours as a result. So what are you going to get then in terms terms of extra output that's produced, probably minimal. So how is the government going to pay for it? The Conservative Party have said that they're going to find it through cost efficiencies, but that sounds a little bit like Elon Musk talking to me. Because are you going to be indiscriminate about this, or can you actually find government waste which nobody has been able to find in 30 or 40 years? Or are we going to wait and see, which is what the Liberals have said at this point, which is we'll tell you how we're going to come up with the money later.
Okay, one of the main battles is which leader will best stand up to U.S. President Trump on the tariff war. And both frontrunners seem to be saying the same thing, though, which is I will match every tariff equally. So how do you see it? What's the best way to deal with Trump on this issue?
So the best way to deal with Trump is to not tariff back. It's weird. It's not going to win votes, but we're taking a bad situation and we're compounding it by creating our own bad situation. This is not the case that the two bads are going to cancel each other out. And it's not even two wrongs make a right. It's that we're taking a clear wrong coming out of the White House and compounding it with another wrong that's self inflicted. So you can't win an election, though, no matter what your party is, by putting your hands in your pockets and just saying, well, hopefully this will go away. So you need to talk tough. You need to say, well, if you're going to damage us, then we're going to try and damage you back. And at a minimum, at least tariff strategically. Try and find the areas not where you have key Republicans in power, but where Republicans won their House seat by a small amount of votes. And so if you can damage those particular areas, those voters are going to say, hey, I thought I was voting Republican because you were offering me something, which you didn't. And then when the House comes up for re-election in 2 years, you might be able to flip it to the Democrats. And now you have a political counterweight to an out-of-control president.
Oh boy. Okay, so if the tariffs remain in place long term, there is talk of the federal government providing bailout packages to citizens as well as to businesses, much like what happened with the COVID pandemic. So, big picture here, what would this actually be a benefit then, or would it be a deficit situation that will simply be too hard to climb out of? What do you think?
Yeah, if you remember during COVID, it was a $300 billion deficit. We've lost our collective minds when the Liberals announced that their recent deficit number was 60 billion, up from 40 billion. We'd kill for 60 billion if $300 billion were the alternative. We're not going to see COVID-style supports. I think what we're going to see is that whatever the government is, Liberal or Conservative, I don't think the NDP are going to be the government. What we're going to see is that they're going to have to think a little more strategically. What industries are in decline anyway? What industries are probably not worth saving, that these tariffs are merely accelerating what was a slow death? You don't offer any bailout packages to them. Industries that clearly have a future but have been disrupted because of the tariffs, those are the ones where you come and say, all right, we're going to help you through this. But the issue then is, are you helping the businesses to remain in business, or are you helping the workers who have been temporarily laid off to get to their next job? That's going to be the defining line between the two parties. Generally speaking, conservatives would tend to support business, liberals would tend to support labor. But here, too, it's a bit of a muddy area because it's hard to say how long these tariffs are going to remain in place and what the long run impact is of businesses that might look to just move to the U.S. and avoid the tariffs like Trump promised them if they came to the U.S. to begin with.
Okay, one of the more interesting promises is Poilievre wanting to cut back on foreign aid spending and instead build up our defenses to protect the Canadian Arctic. So how important is the Arctic to our economic interests?
It's hugely important, and it's been neglected for decades. There's a tremendous amount of energy locked underneath the ocean there that nobody has managed to tap yet just because it's been frozen. And there's shipping routes that are going to become much more important as the Arctic remains water more than it remains ice. And so, given that we've never really encouraged people to live up in the north, let alone that far north, who is there to defend us? And these days we have a complicating factor, which is as inconceivable as it would have been 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. Is it now maybe the U.S. that we also have to worry about? They have a presence in the Arctic, in Alaska. They've made a play for they want Greenland. At what point do they say, well, what's in between Alaska and Greenland? It's the Canadian North. And so do they decide that they want to have access to that too? The Russians have already showed an interest. The Chinese have showed an interest. So for sure you have to spend on defense. What I would maybe push back on is, does it have to come at the expense of foreign aid? Foreign aid can be a very soft way of projecting power and building up friends. And these days, Canada needs all the friends it can have because our best friend just stuck one in our back.
Oh, boy. All right. Mark Carney says he would expand the National Dental Care Plan, while Poilievre is saying that he would not make any cuts to the current plan. So any thoughts on the impact that this could have?
You know, the dental care plan and covering Canadians is not the worst thing. I understand that Poilievre doesn't want to give any credit to a Liberal policy and say, well, I would do that too, especially when up until recently he was dead set against it. But at least admitting that, well, what's already here we're going to keep in place is an acknowledgement that this isn't a bad policy. We take pride in Canada about our nationalized healthcare plan. That can't just be from the neck down. It also has to be from the neck up. And your teeth are clearly a part of that story. So the idea of offering some sort of dental care plan is not a bad policy at all. The devil, of course, is in the details. How are you going to pay for it? Where's that money going to come from? And are we going to end up talking about dentist shortages the way we're talking about doctor shortages when you nationalize some part of the healthcare system?
Okay. What do party leaders need to do in Quebec to positively impact jobs in the economy in that province?
Well, I happen to be in Quebec instead of Alberta today. So, looking out my window, you know what? I think that Trump's done a tremendous amount for Canadian unity at this point. It's our premier in Alberta that seems to be striking the national disunity tone. But in Quebec, they're relatively on board with the idea of Canada. And I think they realize that the idea of an independent, sovereign Quebec is maybe not in their best interest when there's the potential that the U.S. is going to have a hard time with the idea of Quebec being on its own. If it's going to try and capture Canada and make it the 51st state, Quebec would very quickly be number 52 right behind it. It's just not large enough to stand on its own. It doesn't have a strong enough economic base. It doesn't have a large enough population. And it would clearly be reliant on the remnant of Canada to try and keep it in business. So I think what we have right now is a situation where the leader of the bloc realizes that he doesn't have a lot of leg to stand on. And so more his position is going to be to just criticize anything that everybody else says, but he doesn't really have to offer anything in return other than, if you're fed up with the two major parties and you want to vote something different, vote for me. And maybe in 3-5 years, we can revisit what Quebec's future is within Canada when the tariffs go away, hopefully.
And speaking of Quebec, do you see any possibility of Quebec saying yes to a coast-to-coast pipeline?
It's more reasonable now than it would have been 6 months ago. The issue, of course, is that building that pipeline is going to come with all kinds of conditions like every other province. What labor are you going to use? Are you going to export Alberta labor, or are you going to use Quebec labor? You have a whole bunch of unceded territory here where you're going to have Indigenous groups who are going to say, if you're coming across my land, what sort of economic benefits are you going to promise me? And the big issue that Quebec has more than anything is there going to be some proper pricing of that resource that's being shipped across, say like a carbon tax, and what are the provisions that are put in place to make sure that there's no environmental disaster. In Alberta, we say that that's our resource and we're willing to live with the consequences if anything goes wrong. Quebec is going to say that's not our resource because you've made it clear that it's your resource. So what are you going to do to protect us just in case there's a pipeline burst or there's something environmental that comes as a side effect of this? If they can resolve that, I have a feeling they're a lot more willing to play the national pipeline game than they would have been prior to Trump.
Well, thanks so much for your expertise today, Dr. Lander. Great to have you on. It's such interesting times we are living in.
Anytime.
That was Professor Moshe Lander, who is the senior lecturer on economics with Concordia University. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.